Chapter 9. Gossip. I'm sorry, Greta. I should have told you the police are investigating the death of Carl. There was a momentary pause before Greta replied. Carl who? Do I know a Carl? He was the tenant in apartment C, I answered. Quiet Carl, the one we never heard from. He passed away last night. In the house? Asked an alarmed Greta. I'm going to have to do a cleansing. No, I quickly told her. It wasn't in the house. He was found by the Silver River. The police are just doing their due diligence by looking at his apartment. I suppose, responded Greta, it just seems like a lot of police are here. They cordoned off the stairs. I had to tell them I needed to be able to go up and down and confirm I lived in the apartment before they would take down their crime scene tape. They are just being overcautious, I soothed her. Truthfully, I had no idea. Maybe they were doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing during a murder investigation. I suspected it was a murder investigation. What with the missing laptop and the dent in Carl's head. Then again, it could all be completely innocent and nothing but a case of misadventure. That was what I kept telling myself. I am sure they will be done soon and things will go back to normal. I hope so. Sniffed Greta. Are you on the list for the fall fair? You know I am, I replied. I always volunteer. We talked a little about the upcoming event before hanging up the phone. Who was that? Greta. I turned to look at my boss. A little older than me, he came over to look through the stack of files. She was wondering if Casing's Insurance was going to sponsor one of the events for the Autumn Heights Fall Fair. Greta hadn't wondered any such thing. However, I couldn't resist asking Mr. Casings since I knew there was no way he was going to sponsor anyone for any amount of money. He was the type of guy who would get extra condiments from the fast food restaurants and put them in the staff fridge, rather than purchasing them from a grocery store. Oh, I will let her know, nodded Mr. Casings, which meant he would never get back to Greta. I had worked here long enough to know what he really meant when he said things. So what are you up to? I tried not to look at him in disbelief. Every week I came in for 2 afternoons to do filing and reception. I held up a file in my hand and opened the appropriate filing cabinet drawer. Filing between getting the phones. Has it been a busy afternoon for you? Always, Mr. Casings proceeded to say as he went to another drawer, pulling out a couple of files and perusing through them. I happened to know the office had been very quiet this afternoon. His definition of busy and mine were completely separate things. The good news was I would be able to do some other work while waiting between calls. I still had advertising material to write for the upcoming Autumn Frolic. Autumn Heights had a number of festivals each fall, because the canopy of beautiful orange, red, and yellow leaves which graced the town. Tourism brought in a large part of the town's revenue. Mr. Casings brushed past me down the hallway, leaving his files on top of the filing cabinets. I bit down a sigh and added them to my pile to refile. The side door opened, and Mrs. Casings returned from her lunch, walking straight to me. "Did you hear about Carl Smith?" she asked breathlessly. Mrs. Casings was a notorious gossip. She spent her lunches with another group of ladies who liked to one-up each other on the latest talk of the town. "Carl who?" I questioned, pretending to draw a blank for a moment. I was hoping she would get the hint that I wouldn't have any gossip to add to her growing collection regarding Carl. Although, if anyone had let it slip that I found Carl's body, no doubt Mrs. Casings would be back, chastising me for holding out on her. "The guy who was murdered down by the river," gushed Mrs. Casings. "Right." I nodded slowly. Of course, this would be the biggest news making the rounds. "Did they say he was murdered for certain?" "That's what Patty heard from Daisy Sumner, and we all know Daisy's husband is on the police force." Mrs. Casings lowered her voice like she was about to impart a secret. "They said someone hit him over the head, broke his temple, and he died. How terrible!" Somehow, her tone conveyed that she didn't think it was terrible at all. More like she thought it was exciting. Terrible, I echoed. The police have a suspect in mind, confided Mrs. Casings. That was quick. I blinked. Pesky hadn't said any such thing when he had questioned me at the apartment earlier today. Don't they usually take more time to investigate these sorts of things? Daisy said they suspect the person who found him. Mrs. Casings laid out that bombshell like it was the juiciest morsel ever. Who would think that it would be the very person who called it in to the police? The world tilted just a little. I blinked rapidly and reminded myself to keep on breathing. Daisy Sumner was a no-good gossip, I told myself firmly. It's shocking, isn't it? A murder in Autumn Heights! Mrs. Casings tried to keep the smile from her face, but her eyes sparkled at the excitement of it all. Thank you for listening. Did you know that I've written another cozy mystery series called Camping Girl? You can find the audiobooks here on YouTube or on Audible. You can also find the ebooks and paperbacks on Amazon. Happy listening!